Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday. And this week we are going to be talking about Black history in Birmingham. And we are going to show a pre-recorded interview with Mr. Barry McNealy. Mr. McNealy is a social studies teacher at a high school in Birmingham. And so we had to pre-record this around his classes. So I'm really honored to have gotten to talk to him about it. And I hope you enjoy this. And I will be back live with you after the interview to answer any questions in the comments. But please feel free to add any relevant questions in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And here is Mr. Barry McNealy. Enjoy. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Wisdom Wednesday. I am your host, Dorothy Jordan with AARP Alabama. And joining me today is Mr. Barry McNealy. And we are very fortunate to have Mr. Barry here today. He is a native of Birmingham, Alabama. And he actually went to the school system in Birmingham, graduated from Parker High School, and attended Miles College, earning a bachelor's degree in secondary social science education. And so then he served as the intern at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. And then after that, he was hired full-time as their education consultant. And so after many years there, he accepted a position at his alma mater, and I'm sure they were very happy to have him at Parker High School as a social studies instructor. And so now Barry is known as the master tour guide and provides walking tours on it's called the Milestone Walking Tour. Is that correct, Barry?
Yes.
That's wonderful. And so he conducts these tours to talk all about the history of Birmingham and especially Black History Month and Black history in Birmingham. So Barry, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Great. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit, why is Black History Month celebrated in February? I've always been curious about that.
Well, the founder of Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson, he decided to, at the turn of the 20th century, when America was really in one of its lowest periods in terms of race relations in our history, he decided to try to show a positive light for African Americans, hoping to let it spread and let people appreciate the beauty of our culture. And what he did is he selected two individuals. He selected Frederick Douglass and he selected Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's birthday is February the 12th, and Frederick Douglass's birthday is February the 14th. And so he selected that week, and it started out in 1926 as Black History Week. But over time, by 1978, it was expanded to be Black History Month. But when you look at the abolition work that Frederick Douglass gave his life to, and then when you look at the courage and the work that Abraham Lincoln gave his life to, that was a impetus to start looking at the entire African-American experience. And that's why it's in February.
Awesome. That's wonderful. I never knew that, but that is a perfect reason to have it in February. Awesome. So we know that it is really important to study Black history, and not just in February. We should study it throughout the year at all times because it's always there and always important. But why exactly? We know it's important, but can you give us some reasons why it's so important for us to study Black history?
Well, when we study the parts of the whole, we understand the whole that much better. And anytime you are negligent upon appreciating the culture and the identity and the traditions and the contributions of people who are a part of your fabric, then you're lacking. We in this country, we're not tied together by our ancestors. We are a creedal nation. We are a nation that believes in certain ideas and certain fundamental basic things that we share. And when we share those things, we become stronger for the sharing. And if you can walk a mile in my shoes and I can walk a mile in your shoes, we develop an empathy for one another. And that empathy binds us together as a people. And when you don't have that, it's kind of easy to start pulling at the strings and fraying our society. And so the better that we know each other, the more inclusive we can be as a nation. And when we're inclusive, that's when we're strong.
Absolutely. So well put. Thank you. So we obviously know that Alabama, as a state, plays a really important role. What can you tell us a little bit about that role that Alabama plays in Black history?
In terms of African American history and looking at the Black experience and American history, there are few places better than Alabama to get a holistic image of the narrative. When we start with the Alabama River, is where Africans were brought into this country in slavery, and they were brought up the Alabama River to Montgomery. And in Montgomery, there were slave pens where they held human beings. And in the center of Market Avenue, there was a daily slave market that was there. But when you look at Alabama and consider Montgomery, our capital, it's not to stop at slavery. That same Market Street, that same Dexter Avenue is going to hold the telegraph office that the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, sent the order to South Carolina to start firing on Fort Sumter. And so as you look at Alabama, you can see that the Civil War that eventually freed over 4 million African Americans began right here in the state of Alabama with that order from Jefferson Davis. And interestingly enough, directly across the street from that telegraph office that began the Civil War is the bus stop where the Cleveland Avenue bus would stop. And on December the 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks sits on that bus, starting the modern civil rights movement that brought the freedoms and liberties expected by those 4 million people who were freed by the Civil War. It came full circle with the civil rights movement started right across the street by Rosa Parks and the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And all of that is absolutely Alabama. And so there are very few states that can walk through the African American experience from its lowest points to its heights.
Excellent. What a great answer. And you're right. I mean, we do have such a rich history here. And you talked about coming up the Alabama River, and I'm in Mobile. And, one of the biggest things that's happened down here, which is exciting, is they've found the Clotilda, which is the last ship. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit next week when we talk about Mobile. But and then like you said, our civil rights hero Rosa Parks and so many other folks from Alabama who really are those civil rights and Black history heroes that we always need to remember and be proud of and know. So you are in Birmingham. You're a native of Birmingham. What can you tell us some of the highlights? And I know Birmingham itself has such a rich history of for Black history. What are some of the highlights that you would like to point out for Birmingham's Black History Month?
Wow, when you start with Birmingham, you're talking about a city that is what we refer to as a New South city, and New South cities are those cities that came into their own after the American Civil War. And so Birmingham is going to start out in 1871. And as it does, it's going to bring together wonderful industrialists in terms of their knowledge and their ability to create the largest steel producing center in the entire South. And when we think of Birmingham, Birmingham's enduring nickname is the Magic City. And as we take that and we slant it towards the African American experience and talking about Black history, the industrialists like Enoch Inslee and James Withers Sloss and others, as they brought in this industry, and I should mention, by the way, that Birmingham is also the first industrial city ever built entirely away from water. But that's not the magic I was referring to. The magic is that those industrialists, they needed labor. And the end of the Civil War and the Reconstruction era saw a lot of African Americans flood into Birmingham. And they flooded in such great numbers that it was said that Birmingham grew overnight like magic, hence the nickname, the Magic City. And it's tied to the fact that over 60% of all of the labor in Birmingham's iron and steel industry was African American. So it's you start there, but when you start there, you start looking at the first public library in the state of Alabama for African Americans, and you start looking at the A.H. Parker High School, which is going to be the first 4-year African American high school in the entire Jefferson County area, which is going to be so populated that Ebony Magazine is going to come to Birmingham, and they're going to look on the 3,700 plus students, and they're going to call Parker High School the largest Negro high school in the world. That history is just so rich. And when you look at Parker High School, you look at the wonderful alumni, but on a national scale, the idea of African American bands dancing, that is a tradition today. That started right in Birmingham, Alabama at Parker High School with the hit record Tuxedo Junction that talks about the nightlife in Birmingham, Alabama. It's a jazz classic, but this classic was performed by the students of Parker High School. And when they performed the song, they not only performed jazz, but they did the dances that people did when the song was played on the radio. And being that they were the largest Black high school in the world, according to Ebony Magazine, when those kids graduated, they matriculated to historically Black colleges and universities around the country, taking the idea of Black bands dancing with them. And although that was the 1940s, today in 2021, you can't think of the Magic City Classic or any game like that where the bands don't come out and have this wonderful display. And that history doesn't even touch the civil rights history of Birmingham, Alabama, with legendary lawyers like Oscar Adams and Arthur Shores that took on the complex situation of legalized segregation in the city of Birmingham. It doesn't touch the grassroots activists like the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who started the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, who is going to bring Martin Luther King to Birmingham and take on Eugene Theophilus Connor, more affectionately known as Bull Connor, in massive demonstrations in 1963 that toppled the most segregated city in the United States of America. And that toppling is going to lead to John F. Kennedy calling for the Civil Rights Act. And Dr. King is going to win the Nobel Peace Prize as a result of the work that the peaceful demonstrations in Birmingham by thousands of school-aged children, that history is something that people travel from all around the world to come to Birmingham and learn about. And tragically, that history also includes the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church by the Ku Klux Klan, where 4 innocent little girls were killed, and one little girl was grievously injured and lost her sister. So when we start looking at that history, and it even expands to a national level when you consider that Angela Davis grows up in Birmingham, Alabama, and Condoleezza Rice grows up in Alabama and Birmingham, so that Black history that you can consult from the Birmingham story is just very, very voluminous, and it's inspirational.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So well put. Yeah, it's Birmingham does have such that rich history, and you talked about so much that I didn't know about, with the bands and all of that, and just like you said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think one thing that you said when I asked you why we need to study Black history is because we've got to, or the strands will start to separate and we'll start to fray as a society. And that just really resounded with me. And I think that in Birmingham, it's so notable that a lot of what we have today was woven in Birmingham. And so I just really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And and speaking of sharing, it is Black History Month, and we are here today to talk about that. But like I said at the beginning, Black history is not just a month; it's all the time, and we should celebrate it and remember it all the time. So, do you have some advice on how we can continue, for the month of February, but also beyond, sharing that Black history?
Well, I mentioned that the city of Birmingham has people visiting from all over the world. And I would say that a pilgrimage to the Birmingham area, there are walking tours, the milestone walking tour that you mentioned earlier. It takes you through the tumultuous days of the 1960s as you walk through Kelly Ingram Park, and you see the trees that the fire hoses literally peeled like bananas, and you can walk across the street and you can see the 16th Street Baptist Church and where people worshiped and where they found their courage to go out into these marches. And ultimately, where in an act of desperation, the Klan tried to silence them by bombing that church. Those walking tours are very impactful because it takes you to the actual places. And then there are bus tours that you can take around Birmingham that take you to areas like Dynamite Hill. And to learn the story of Dynamite Hill, You have to kind of put yourself back into the 1930s and 40s when Birmingham's housing ordinances were so oppressive that 43% of the population, which Black people made up, was relegated to living in only 11% of the residential territory. And to make matters worse, they passed this law that said that Center Street would be reserved for white people on the left side of the street and Black people on the right side of the street. And as Black people fought to have more area and territory to live in, the Knights of the White Camellia, the Ku Klux Klan began to bomb their homes indiscriminately. And they had over 10 bombings to initially start it out. But in the end of the day, there were over 60 bombs set in one neighborhood alone. And so they started calling that area Dynamite Hill. And I think that as we progress, sometimes we forget where we've come from. And as we forget where we've come from, I think we forget to take pride and also take consolation in the fact that as a nation, we have been frayed before. We have had discontent before. We have had times when we were separated, but we fought through those times. And I would say to anyone wanting to preserve or learn more about Black history, Birmingham and Montgomery and Selma are destinations that they need to add to their list of places to go. And if not physically, go virtually. Because as we visit these places and as we visit these narratives, it helps us to understand that discontentment can be overcome and that we are still moving towards what the founders said in the preamble. We're still moving towards a more perfect union. It never said anything about a perfect union. It said that we would move towards it. And when you're leaving out the narrative of minorities, a lot of times it's kind of hard to see the progress that has been made towards that more perfect union. So I would say that people should visit your civil rights battlegrounds, and not just in Alabama, but to visit them, if not physically, visit them virtually.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you and learning so much from you, Barry. I really do appreciate it. I'm honored that you've spent some time with us today to talk about this and to give us this wonderful, rich history of not just Birmingham, but Alabama as a whole. And I want to thank you so much again for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Great. All right, folks. Well, that was our conversation with Barry McNealy. And again, I want to thank him. He had such great information, and I'm hoping that he will be able to resume his walking tours soon so that when you're in Birmingham, you can go check that out. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Let's see what we have here. And I put this one up earlier. Carolyn Newton said, great information should be studied all the time, not just in February. Completely agree with you, Carolyn. We're actually working on some further Zoom presentations and workshops to continue throughout the year to celebrate and learn about Black history. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And let's see, the next question we had was Bill Hawkins, is Black History Month celebrated in other nations? So Bill, because Barry is not actually with us today, I looked this up, and it looks like that Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Netherlands also celebrate Black history. So that was a really good question, very interesting. And then Bill asked another great question. What resources, books, etc. would you suggest we use to learn more about Black history? Another great question. I think Barry really hit the nail on the head with one of his final questions was really do what you can to immerse yourself in the history and the experience. Visiting the museums, whether they be in person or virtually. Ann Hales mentioned that the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery offers virtual tours, and yes, they do. We've got some virtual tours down here in Mobile with the Dora Franklin Finley Historical Trail. They'll actually be on next Wednesday to talk about history in Mobile. And so there's plenty of things. I actually did some Googling while I was this was playing, Bill, and I just typed in, Black history resources and came up with a long line of them. So I think you've got plenty of stuff to keep you busy. And let's see here. I've also wanted to include the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, which is how Barry does his walking tours. And like I said, he was actually worked there before he became a social studies instructor. So that is www.bcri.org. They've got some great resources and information as well. And I also am going to go back here and again show some things that we've got coming up with Black history. Next Wednesday afternoon, the 24th at 1 p.m., we're going to be doing a Black art history tour. And at 10 a.m. next week, we're going to have another Wisdom Wednesday again with for Mobile. And so we're going to have a lot of interesting, great stuff. We also have something for veterans coming up on the 23rd. It is going to be an excerpt of the documentary Sky Blossom about veteran caregivers. And we're going to be able to meet the Allen family and kind of get some, have a panel and get some great information and about veterans and their caregivers. We always want to honor them. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming. We've got a really quick video to show you all of our events coming up next week. It's going to be a busy week, going to be a great week. So please stay tuned for that. And we will see you next Wednesday. Stay wise, my friends.